Okay, so what I would really like for us to do in this meeting is have an opportunity to actually share our courses. And if you have Canvas open and if you're able to get to a place in your course that you think would be interesting to share and have a conversation about, I'd like to give you this opportunity to start thinking about where might that space be, and go ahead and log in and start getting that ready. I'd like for this to be
Hey, Curry, how do I reduce this on my screen so I can get into my browser?
yeah, thank you for asking.
Over my whole damn computer.
Right. You can click escape on the keyboard.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Thank
or
you.
hovering.
Sorry to bother you.
No problem. No problem. That's good. I forgot to say that. So I would like this to be kind of an open discussion where we just go from one cool thing to the next and sort of put into practice this undefined space, but I've given it some structure as well. So I'm going to talk about the structure and just give a quick overview, and then we'll just get into sharing our courses. So we'll kind of, whoever would like to go first when I'm done with this overview, we can start there. Okay. So I proposed a few questions for us to think about. So like, when we're designing our online courses, we want them to be navigable. Number one, we don't want students frustrated with how to find stuff, but how do we do so in a way that's surprising, right? That's not stale and in a rut, right? From week to week to week to week. And we also need students to participate, but how do we do that in a way that's compelling and not necessarily compulsory, right? Where we're getting really rich and invested content and contribution, rather than sort of dreary, I agree with what she said. These binaries I set up, I think will be interesting to explore. Defined space and navigation and instruction versus undefined navigation and instruction. The difference between linear modules and the experiences we hope a student will have in that design versus explorable spaces, and the experiences we think students will have there. The difference between prescriptive and open assignments, walled off spaces where we want students working by themselves in kind of an isolated experience, and then community-centric spaces where we really hope students are kind of bouncing into one another and getting to know one another. And then finally, again, that kind of required or provoked participation and how we see our course design facilitating that. And then I also shared these podcasts. Both of these instructors are, I think, describing play in different ways. One with kind of a digital storytelling approach, and the other with more of a gamification approach. So I'm hoping that we can talk about that, maybe look at examples of that, etc. So I would like to open up the floor. Would anybody like to start? Is there something you're thinking about? Can you share a bit of your course? Where would you like to go? I can call on people too.
Don't call me.
Okay, all right.
I don't mind sharing my course, but not, I mean, you just want to, like, with regard to what? Like how the navigation functions?
Sure. So exactly. So I think this is all on design. And it could be something you want to show us is really playing within this sort of binary, or is answering this question, one of those things. And you know what I'll do also? I will share this Google Doc in the chat. So if you would like to have those questions handy and even contribute to the Google Doc, you can find it in the chat. So Tony, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I don't know what happens. I share my homepage or my screen, I mean.
Yep, so I'm going to stop sharing. And when you hover over, you should see like a green box with an arrow that says share.
At the bottom right here?
I believe so.
So if I click on share screen right now, it gives me choices.
Yep, and so you can pick, I think picking the window, so like the browser, you can pick the whole desktop, but the browser is a better option.
So where it says Google Chrome, is that, I have whiteboard, iPhone, camera, and Google Chrome. Let me click here. I don't know if this is share screen. Let's see. Okay, what's happening now?
I can see your browser.
Okay, so it says Zoom?
Yes.
Okay. So I can share. So I have two things pulled up right now. Let's see. This is, wait, that's not the one I wanted. This here. Okay. So this is my hybrid course.
Okay.
And if you look right now, you can see that we're obviously on week 13. So you see here?
Yep.
So this is the whole course. And basically what happens is every Wednesday at 12 o'clock noon, the new week opens, because I just met them last night. Well, this week I'm conferencing, but usually we meet on Tuesday nights. And so at the end of our meeting, I talk about what they need for the upcoming week. And then I take all of the material and then I create that week's materials. And so this has been growing since the first, right? This is the homepage you're looking at right here. This has been growing since the beginning of the semester. And if we click on one of these, like if I go to week 10, then here's what week 10 looks like. Week 10, so there's always a review of the class that they just had the night before. And then there's the online materials from the Wednesday that they receive it to the following Monday. And then I try to put everything right here. So everything links out to like Google Docs, etc. Occasionally what happens is like if I've embedded all of these videos right here that I want them to take a look at. And if they click here, then that takes them to another page where the video is embedded. So if I click here right now, then they can see that, oh, I don't know what's happening with this TED link, but usually the video is then right there. Let's go back for a sec.
Okay.
Whoops. Are you still seeing my?
No.
Where did I go? Did I vanish?
No, you're there, but we lost your screen.
Uh-oh.
Maybe go back to share.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
So let's see this.
I think playing with Zoom is another benefit of this session.
Does it pop back up?
You did. Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, cool. So basically everything is right here for the week. And then these are the discussions that they're involved in. And then this is the journal. And there's usually like 3 components to the journal. And so the idea, at least with regard to navigation, is that I try to be as absolutely straightforward as I can be. And so everything is on a single page and everything links out from that page. And then when they go here, that links to the discussion board. And when they go here, it's a single entry, but there's usually anywhere from 2 to 3 tasks. But all of those tasks then are given to me in a single entry, and then I respond to all of those directly throughout the week.
I love this setup. It's so clear.
So this is the whole course is like this. And then very quickly, I can show you this. So this is my fully online 202. And so this is the homepage for the 202. There's always an overview of the week. Same sort of thing. It opens on a given day. Then there's the overview. And then I also have the schedule, the link to the schedule for the unit that we're on. And on the schedule, I have what's happening for each week. So even if they don't get like the week 14 materials, they have an idea of what we'll be doing. And then I also over here, I just started doing this semester, is I have the amount of points that they can receive for a given week.
Oh, wow.
So that they see if it's like heavy lifting, like so they can see like, oh, if a draft is due, then there's a lot of points. If there's this, and so it just gives them an understanding of like what weeks, and it's not necessarily heavier because it's the same amount of work, but obviously sometimes that work is worth more, right? So they can just get a sense of what's happening. And then there's one link here, and then when they click on that link, I don't even know what's happening right here. Yep, they get taken. And then usually I have a review, although right now there's some schedule stuff. And so same thing, there's the schedule reminder, drafting and research, all of the materials. And then occasionally I embed my videos directly into one page, and occasionally it links out to another Canvas page, just depending. And so I try to be as straightforward as possible. And again, same sort of thing. Usually with this course, there's more than 2 assignments in a given week, but it's the same logic. Everything just links to a single page, and then everything is hyperlinked out of that page. And one thing that I've started to do is I used to hyperlink out like to YouTube or to Google Docs, etc. But I've tried to embed everything into the Canvas infrastructure. So even if I have a Google Doc now, I've actually just embedded it into another Canvas page. If I have a YouTube video, it's been embedded into another Canvas page. So even though all of this stuff's like third party, it still feels to the student as if everything is in Canvas.
Yeah. That's cool.
So there's just kind of the basic logic of my navigation, regardless of if it's the hybrid course or the fully online course.
Tony, in the online course for that week's worth of work, how much time are you kind of estimating students are going to spend on that?
Are we doing fully online right now? Fully online?
Fully online. What's your range?
Well, it completely depends. I mean, to be honest, it's probably anywhere from 3 to 4 hours.
A week?
A week. So I'm trying to think, like right now, yeah, with reading, discussion boards, the write-ups on everything, that's probably what's coming out to.
What about the working on the papers?
So the work on the papers is, so here's the way that here's kind of the structure, right? There's reading materials, there's discussion board, there's little writing materials, and then there's drafting materials.
Right.
And so the drafting stuff is happening throughout 4 weeks, right? On average for a given project.
Right.
The writing journals are happening week to week to week to week to week. The discussion board's happening week to week to week to week to week, and the readings are happening week to week to week to week to week.
Right. But so if I'm a student in your class, I can get this where all the work done for your class in 3 to 4 hours a week?
You could probably do 4 hours a week on some weeks, and then as we get closer to the final projects, you're probably adding more those weeks, anywhere from 6 to 7 as before the project comes in.
Because it looks like more than that to me.
No.
It looks like a lot, but I'm sure you're right. I'm just just looking at it, it looks like tons of cool stuff.
I think so all the videos that you look at are really quick. You know, they're anywhere from 5 minutes to 9 or 10 minutes.
Right.
And then the readings are however long readings take to read, annotate, respond to questions, etc.
Yeah.
And then the drafting stuff, they're drafting in sections, right? So they'll be like, so for example, on the current project we're on, there's the drafting of the intro, then there's drafting of section 1, which is about 2 to 3 paragraphs, and then there's drafting of sections 2 and 3, which is anywhere from 3 to 4 paragraphs, and then they put it all together.
Right.
And so there's like 4 weeks right there.
Right.
But it's so hard to say, right? Because you never know how long it takes people to, you know, I have some students, it takes them 5 hours to write 3 paragraphs, and other students, they put in 40 minutes and then they go back and revise it. That takes another 40 minutes. You know, it's so hard to.
Yeah.
That's actually a really good question, is to think about how much time our students are spending on the course, because we're supposed to budget for them, something in the neighborhood of 6 to 8 hours a week or something, right? Because
if it's fully online, it can be 12 hours.
Yeah.
Right? So, because it's four units times 3 hours if you use the Carnegie thing. But yeah, I think,
who knows? Because like Tony was saying, all students operate at a different pace.
Yeah, and if you go that high, you find your students will feel pretty overwhelmed. Because I think I do that, and I lose a lot of students over that.
Yeah.
I have a question. I thought that we were supposed to be giving the 12 hours, so that's what I've been aiming for. And the feedback I got after the end of last semester when I was for my fully online class was that it was the toughest class they had ever taken. They had more work and so I wanted to know, like, am I completely out of line with that? Should I really be kind of dropping down the workload?
Well, I'm in that 10 to 12 zone, and I'm getting the same kind of feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I am too. And I think, you know, this doesn't happen every class in my on-site class, but there are a couple classes where I go, okay, we got 10 minutes left, and a few students go, wait, what? Like, what? We're already at the end? Like, it speeds by. I wonder how often that happens in my online class, where they sit down with something and they feel like, well, that was 2 hours, and I can't believe it went by like that. Or if the 2 hours feels like, you know, a drudgery, which I think it really matters, right? And I think that's getting back to kind of the larger topic of what we're talking about, how engaging are these tasks that we're assigning that we want students to spend time with. And how can we design them in ways that make it more of an engaging experience. But the other issue that's being raised by this is just, you know, for whom is an online class conducive or supportive, right? Meaning we assume I'm a working student, therefore I need to take online coursework. But if I misunderstand that a 4-unit class means 12 hours online, those are expectations we need to reconcile. You know what I mean?
It's also pretty important because some of these students, like, there's no technological challenge to sitting in a chair in a classroom. But for some of our online students, like, that's a couple more hours a week, is trying to navigate the technological environment that they're not that adept at. And so for some of them, maybe it's 15 hours, you know?
Absolutely. Yep.
It's something important to consider, which is why we should probably have some kind of orientation class for online students that they have to pass out of. That way they don't spend so much time like figuring it out when they're also trying to figure out English, for example.
Right. Yeah, we don't have students spending 15 minutes at the beginning of class figuring out how to sit in their chairs.
Right.
But we do have students taking 15 minutes to figure out how to operate Zoom or operate whatever it is we're asking them.
Yeah, and rarely does the classroom like freeze and shut down.
Right.
Right.
Totally.
In the middle of an exam. I mean, that almost never happens.
Right.
And so, you know, there's all these different factors that complicate it.
That's right.
Well, the reason I was asking Tony about the time is I think I'm at the too heavy end.
Yeah.
And Tony and I have been talking about this because he was visiting my class last semester. And so I really like this design. I also really like the idea of the week. And I've been working around 2 due dates a week. But it sounds like, Tony, you've got them kind of on a weekly schedule, right? That they've only got 1 due date a week for these various tasks.
Yeah. Sorry, can I chime in for a sec?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So there's 1 due date. But what happens throughout the week is that I'm doing various things too. So I occasionally hop into the discussion boards, although I'm not frequently in the discussion boards. And then I'm also replying to their work. And so what inevitably happens is when I reply to their work, I may ask them to shoot me an email, or they may respond to my reply. And so there's all of these other little conversations that are happening throughout the week. And they're not due dates, but there's this sense that the conversation's continuing with each student. And so it's almost as if there's a major conversation with weekly due dates, and then there's these 22, 23 individual conversations that I'm having with students. So I'm helping one student with research for a project, another student we're crafting a thesis statement, another, you know what I mean? It's that sort of stuff. And to be fair, I'm doing more work with some students than others, but it's because some students need more or they want more and others don't. And I'm totally cool with that.
Right. When you say you're responding to their work, do you mean you're responding to like their major papers and writing projects, or are you also responding to their journals?
I respond to every single writing journal every week. So I received their work. We have this conversation at the beginning. I received their work on Thursdays. Originally it was at noon, but then they all yelled at me, so it got pushed to 4. I received their work on Thursdays at 4, and then I spend all Friday. I upload the new week on Friday morning after looking at their work and seeing what we need to deal with, and then I respond to all journals on Friday, and then I respond to papers on Friday evening and Saturday morning. And so then those conversations ensue throughout the beginning of the next week, and then they're working on the week's materials.
Tony and I actually have a very similar layout, having looked at his. I also have a big due date at the end of the week. My week ends Sunday evening at midnight, and then I launch the new week on Monday morning. But I also have these kind of benchmarks throughout the week. So like if it's like a discussion week, they're encouraged / required to post their initial post by Wednesday, and then they have the remainder of the week to respond to their peers. And that's so you don't get everybody posting on Sunday, the usual thing. And so it's, there are these little check-ins throughout the week commonly, but the major submissions happen at the very end on Sunday evening.
I like that.
Tony, when you talk about discussions, are they on top of the journals? So there's a discussion where people are talking to each other, and there's the journals where they're writing directly to you? Yeah.
So the journals, like an example journal, an example writing journal for a week would be the first, there may be 3 tasks. Task 1 may be that I ask them to pinpoint a specific example in the reading and explain the claim in their own words. Articulate the support, and then provide an example of support from their own lived experience. So it's kind of like a comprehension application sort of thing. So it's like a paragraph long response that they do on a reading. And then there may be a second thing that's like, okay, now I want you to provide, decide on a topic of these, maybe I'll give them 3 to 4 topics, decide on a topic, and then I want you to craft a paragraph wherein you do blank, blank, blank. And so I'm asking them to work on a particular writing task, like analyze, apply, summarize, something like that. And then the third task may be something really simple. As we're moving forward to this next project, what idea or what artifact do you have in mind and why? So these
So
are the,
let me just ask, these 3 tasks, is that one journal post?
that's one journal. Yeah.
So see, that sounds to me like at least an hour of writing.
Yeah.
And then there's a discussion beyond, aside from that, right?
Yes.
So there's a discussion over here, then there's this multi-part journal, and then they're working on some paper or project.
Exactly.
And is the discussion usually responding to the reading?
The discussion is often responding to an initial, it starts by responding to so for a given unit,
Yeah.
the discussion starts with the reading. And then that discussion usually, like the next version of that discussion, goes from the reading to particular topics so that they're kind of brainstorming topics with each other. And then it goes from the brainstorming of the topics to like potential research directions or how they could craft a claim or something like, it gets kind of into the nuts and bolts of the assignment.
That's in the discussion.
That's the discussion. So sometimes they're sharing with each other like, oh, you should check out this TED Talk or, you know, that sort of thing. Or, yeah, that's a great topic. Or, yeah, if you're going to do that topic, don't forget that, you know. So almost everything we do ultimately ends up on the topic itself. There's very little that's kind of ancillary, right? It starts, I mean, you've seen my course before where I start in like the real abstract land, and then it kind of, it starts to hone in on the specifics.
So I kind of see, Tony, the way that you've designed both courses, yeah, is the like you said, the homepage. That's really the structured space, and it's structured both by like an assignment within a sequence within a unit. It's also structured by time and these deadlines. But once students get past your homepage, that content page where all the specific things are, that's a little more loosely structured. It seems like. In other words, there's not really anything there telling me other than left to right, top to bottom, I should do this first, I should do that next, I should do this. So, but is there something that you're offering that orients the use of that space?
Yeah, in fact, I would hope that they're reading top to bottom. And then what happens is that I've had to embed reminders. So like if they cheat, right, and they just want to go to the assignment for the given week because it's popping up for them, if they click on that assignment, then in the description of the assignment, I've hyperlinked back to everything that they would have to use.
Right.
And so it'll say, you know, make sure you watch this video, and then that video is hyperlinked.
Cool.
Although what I do at times as like a little psychological trick is I don't hyperlink them directly to the video. I hyperlink them back to that page.
Right.
So they have to go back to the page and find the video.
Right.
So it's like a little thing where they're like, oh, he must have given me the wrong hyperlink. And it's like, no, I didn't.
Right. Awesome. Thank you, Tony. So can we, Jason or Donna, can you look at your courses, or do you have something to share that fits these, or maybe something different?
Sure. I mean, mine is not terribly different from what we just saw, but let me see.
Perfect. So Tony, if you could stop sharing.
Yeah.
Little red.
Stop sharing, Tony.
Wait, how do I get back to the big page? Sorry.
Right. So it kind of, the Zoom menu pops.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Stop share.
There you go.
Are we good?
You got it.
Cool.
And then Jason, now you should be able to.
So if I click on share, then I will click on desktop.
There you go.
Okay.
That works.
And then
Perfect.
are we seeing my page?
Yep.
Nice. Okay. So this is my home page. Pretty basic. Has announcements. General message to start for first week, tells them where to go. But after that, we do, each week there'll be an announcement which will direct them into the modules. And we can see them all because we're in the chat. Whoa. Do I need to mute? Maybe. I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Hold on, maybe I need to.
I'll mute.
Let's see. Let me try that again. Okay, so cool. So anyway, the students would only see these units as they become available, but we'll be able to see them all because we're in the teacher view. But they're grouped around particular objectives that track with our outcomes. This is an English 100 class. And so we have like a week where we do a bunch of nuts and bolts for MLA style and that continues into week 3 because there's so much to do with there. But the week I really want to show you is when we get into the research paper. It was in Unit 5. And so the students can click in, and it starts with an overview, which connects what we're going to do with the outcomes for the course and then to the things that we've previously done. And then you can just move through it and find, this week we're examining research as it relates to research writing. And so what I have them do for this week is they listen to this TED Radio Hour on the spirit of inquiry, and then watch this TED Talk by Naomi Oreskes, which she talks about, like, why do we trust people who provide information to us? And that's to kind of kickstart everybody into thinking about what the collection of information means and our responsibilities with it, and just kind of get our minds turning on kind of some big concepts before we dig into, well, they've already been doing research at this point, but really dig into a big meaty research project. And then when we do that week is we do a big discussion about those topics. And so I will give this kind of like preamble about it. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I asked them to post their initial 300-word response to these questions by Wednesday so that we have some material to work with. And then they respond throughout the rest of the week to their peers. And these questions track with the things that they've just listened to and watched on those 2 things I embedded on the previous page. And that kind of takes us through the week. And this is this is an active one. So anyway, after that, we go, let's see, where's the next? It's probably way down at the bottom of this page. Okay, don't go blind with that. I'm just trying to scroll fast. Anyway, lots of responses there. It was a really good discussion. And then they're also beginning work on their research paper that week. And so we're going through topic selection. The links link back to some of our lessons from the previous weeks with deal with critical reading and research tool exploration and MLA style and all of that. And then this project we'll work on for like maybe a month. It's a pretty big research paper. I've gotten into pretty much embedding everything, as Tony was saying as well. So there's not a lot of linking out. Everything's kind of contained in the course. And then what else do I have going on this week? And then we have a quiz on our reading. We're reading The Omnivore's Dilemma in this class. My theme is human ecology for my 100 course. And so we read some texts that are involved with that. And so the quizzes end up turning into discussions the following week. So that's kind of like a typical week in my class and what it looks like structurally.
I think it's interesting the function of the overview. In your class, the overview is, it seemed, I didn't read it too carefully, so you can correct me if this is not accurate,
Sure.
But the overview looks like a description of, here are the content, the concepts, and how you'll engage those things.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, and it's trying to kind of look back and look forward at the same time to orient them to what we're doing currently.
Yeah, I like that. And I guess the difference in Tony's class is the overview is also the content itself, right? So the overview of the week's work is also the links I use to get to that work. So it's less a preamble than right? Go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just think that's an interesting, like, those 2 different design decisions that are facilitating, a heads up about what we're about to experience.
Yeah, and if you look at the bottom of my overview, which I've put back up here, there are some links to what we're doing that week.
Oh yeah, right on.
It does try and like give them an opportunity to go right to it after they've read the overview,
Cool.
because of course they all read the overview very carefully,
Right.
and just make that assumption flat out. But this is one of the ways they can access that material as well.
Cool, awesome.
So where does the choice piece fit in as we think about these 2 classes we've seen? Where are we providing choices and play spaces, or are we really are we still in a stage where we're focused on just making sure people know where they need to go? Because that's kind of where I feel I am, that a lot of my work is just getting them where they need to go, and I'm structuring things to do that. Do you guys have more of a play choosing element to what you're describing?
I'll just share two quick things, guys, if it's okay.
Yeah.
So let me, hold on. Curry, how do I share that, or how do I go?
Oh, Jason needs to
Yeah,
stop.
let me stop mine.
Yep.
There
There you go.
Mine are short. But Jim, the two examples I'll share kind of touch on the idea of play, or getting students to participate because they really want to participate, or at least one was an attempt, or I feel like one was a successful attempt and the other was not successful at all. All right, what do I do? Share screen? Desktop? No. Chrome.
I think we should have a 3-hour meeting on not successful stuff at some point.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I got some stuff.
Sure. All right, can you see my browser?
Yes.
Okay. So I was thinking about this question. How do we encourage participation in online assignments that are compelling and not compulsory? So at the beginning of the semester, I think I shared this at the letters retreat, but before the semester started, I sent students a Google Doc, and it was just to get them to share something about themselves. And I just asked them this question, what's your favorite song, book, TV show, video game? And I put together this simple Google doc with a table. And then I provided quite a few at the beginning just to show them some variety and to tell them about myself, but then also to try to covertly train them to use Google Docs in a really simple manner. So all they're doing is filling in cells, right? It's like doc is set to edit. It's pretty much like write your name here, write something you love here, and then write a sentence about why you love it here. And the idea is to get them ready for future discussions to take place later in the semester. So I did that, and I didn't know how successful it was going to be, but to be totally honest, I feel like this was the most successful thing I've done all semester as far as student participation goes. And when I say successful, it's because I got like 6 full pages out of the students, right? And some students posted more than once. So I thought it was really successful, and some of them really cared about it. Like, you can read some of these. This is actually from an SI student about Billy Joel. There's one from, just thoughts about the Killers, for instance. But a lot of really thoughtful, and the variety was great, right? And then you notice that some of these are highlighted in red. And what I did was, at a certain point in the semester, I highlighted certain texts. And what I did was I told them that you might be able to use this text for your final essay, which is the lens assignment in my class. So it was also a covert way to introduce stuff for the lens assignment that they didn't know they could use, but surprise, you can actually possibly use this thing that you love. And it just created another option, and they were doing work for it. So I thought this was really successful, and I want to do more with this and take this to another level, but I'm still thinking of ideas. This kind of set up what I was hoping to be a successful non-compulsory discussion board environment for the students. And so in my class for the second unit, I wanted to generate discussion without making it mandatory. And so what I did was I created something similar through these optional discussions, and I paired reading. So this section of a memoir with this film, this section of a memoir with this photo essay, this section with this reading here. And then all I did was create the tables for it, right? And so students could write their name, I asked them a question, they could fill out kind of however they wanted. Not very many students participated, as you can see, right? So it wasn't very successful, and I'm thinking of ways that it could be. But the good thing about it was, you'll notice right here, this is more successful. And what I did was I actually used this in my on-ground class, and I had my on-ground students participate in it. And what I'm finding is that by taking this approach with these tables, what I can do is I can bring my on-ground with my online classes together so that my on-ground students maybe lead the discussion in a sense because they're in class with me, but then and then my online students have an opportunity to access more ideas and information all of which could possibly be used for their essays. So I like the ideas behind it. I just need to find ways to get more folks involved. And so if you guys have ideas, I mean, obviously if I make it mandatory and assign points, that's a simple way. But I feel like the structure and the framework is kind of cool that I've set up, but it needs work, you know. It needs to get to where we were at the beginning of the semester with this kind of robust, playful, I think, participation.
Yeah, I love that, Chad.
Cool, thanks.
The only, because I do optional discussions as well, but I actually provide points for them so that throughout the entire course, we end up having like 104 points, right? My course is only out of 100 points. And so there's built-in extra credit. And so the idea is if there's 15 discussions throughout the semester, they really only have to participate in 10 or 11 of them, but they're allowed to participate in all of them. And so I try to kind of play that game where they're going to be involved. They know they have to do it. Hopefully they're involved in the ones that they're really interested in. But yeah, they can be involved in all of them. And so one thing I've done is made it optional, but I have provided the points. I don't know if that helps at all.
And Tony, do you, if you're only at 100 points, it sounds like the optional ones are worth a very small amount of extra credit.
Everything I do is worth a very small amount.
Yeah.
So for example, when they're in the discussion boards and they provide like a response, and I kind of do it in the same way Jason does, where it's like, 250 word response and make sure you do this and you can't just agree, yada, yada, yada.
Right.
And then after that, it's like 0.5 points.
Right.
It's like they don't get a lot for this stuff, but they realize early on that's worth more than it seems.
But that works for me because I do SI, for instance, and by attending SI sessions, students get a point per session, and so I'm kind of encouraging through extra credit in that sense. But for the online students who can't access SI, it makes sense to do something like that to encourage playful participation.
Yeah. And there's something else you did that I love the idea of combining the on ground with the online. I just did something, I just pulled it up on my screen. It's similar to what you were doing, except it's for research.
I stopped sharing, so you could share if you want. Or...
let me see if I can pull it up really quickly. And it's not perfect, but the idea is cool. It's the first time I've done it like this. Where do I go to share again? Hold on.
So it's that green box.
Got it. Okay, so this, can we see this here? Share screen. So if we're looking at this document right here, it's crowdsourcing research. And so we have all these topics, and then the students had to go in, and this is online and on ground. It's just one document right now. And they just added all of the links. And so it's kind of a bastardized version of an annotated bibliography where they have to give a sentence overview and then put it in. Put the hyperlink in. But the cool thing is that I'm conferencing this week, and it's amazing to see that they're borrowing the research from each other. So they're like, oh yeah, Caden had this really cool article about such and such, and it connects. And so I have this kind of very similar chat to what you were doing, where it's like getting them all on one page. So we have this document now, and there's like maybe 8 themes on here, but like look at the amount of research per theme. And so if it's the role of food, they just have a ton of places that they could potentially go, and they're actually using it. So that worked really well.
So and Tony, just to that,
but cool.
Tony, that point about getting everything on the same page, for me, I've been trying to make a greater effort to centralize everything, as much as possible, which was the reason behind putting all those discussions on the same Google Doc, and that might look like this long, giant document, but I think it's easier than having to go and find links for everything, and kind of on that note, for my essay prompts, what I've been doing a lot lately is my online students and my on-ground students both use the same essay prompt. And what I do, though, is when I introduce the essay, they just get 2 pages. They get the prompt, and then they get the rubric, right? But then as the unit progresses and as we have discussions, I add to that Google Doc prompt. So suddenly a 2-page prompt becomes a 3-page prompt, and that prompt has a sample outline all of a sudden. Then the 4th page, one week, has a sample paragraph. And then what I'll do is I'll take pictures of outlines we do in my on-ground class, and then I just add those pictures to the Google Doc, and then suddenly my online students now have access to a discussion that took place in the on-ground classroom. And then by the end of the unit, I have this prompt that's now about 10 pages long, but it's not overwhelming because I didn't dump it on them at the very beginning of the unit. Instead, I gave them 2 pages, and then over the course of, say, 4 weeks, it grew gradually, and so they were able to meaningfully absorb each one of those pages and some of the content that's on those pages.
And you helped it. I mean, they helped it grow.
Right,
That's
right.
That's really cool. I like that a lot.
So I think one thing, Chad, about the optional discussion board, I think this is an issue of design. In same thing with that question of when is choice provoking participation and when is choice actually precluding that participation.
Right.
Because I've got so many other things to do. If it's optional, then I just that's the thing I let go of. But within Tony's approach, and I do this also. By the end of the semester, you have X amount of times you need to participate. And I think that works really well, but if in a given week there's like 10 options, then I get one student that participates in this one in this one, and then they never talk to each other.
They're spread thin.
Right, it's spread thin. So that's the kind of that balance in design, where is choice compelling, and then when is it not allowing me to get to what I want to get to? I think it's really interesting. That's what I kind of hear you saying as you're thinking through. I just wanted to sort of sum that up.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Cool.
Can I ask folks, I know that we're not talking about too much, but as you read or you watched Gibbs, and the idea of creativity, open-endedness, and choice, I think it was, and then you looked at what she was teaching in her classes and the level, how did you feel about your own class and approach after kind of observing her?
Like shit? Oh, sorry.
Well, I mean, maybe, but then, I feel like I could do all that in my creative writing class, no problem. But
that's the question I've been struggling with, Chad. How can I really create choice and play over a sustained thing? Like you, I've had some success with cool things early on, but then when I try to integrate that into the process of writing a paper or try to integrate that into the process of creating a discussion, that's where I'm struggling, to make that move. I've been thinking, though, that I recently got reamed and Rate My Professor for having too many gay writers in my 201 course. I got 3 awful ratings in a row. I think it was the MAGA crowd or something. Anyway, but then I started realizing, part of the problem is students feel trapped. And just having choices breaks down resistance a little bit, right? So I know in my American Lit course, I used to say, okay, we're going to read 2 plays, but you can pick any pair from these 6 pairs. So I created 6 pairs of plays. Oh, okay. You could pick any pair, and then they worked from there. They worked in groups related to that, and then they did oral exams with me. I'm like, why aren't I doing that in 201? I was doing it in Lit, and then the other thing is, I've noticed over time, I've prepared a lot of different poetry units. I've done a unit on Plath and Rich, and I've done a unit on Harlem Renaissance, and I've done a unit on Latinx poetry. And every year or semester, I put one of those in. Well, why am I doing that? Why not let them pick from all 4? Right. You can do, if you're into T.S. Eliot, here's a modernist strand, and you can look at Eliot and William Carlos Williams. If you're interested in 20th century feminism, do Plath and Rich. If you're interested in Latinx, go that path. Here's a Harlem Renaissance path. So what I'm working on my 201, trying to recreate is taking all this stuff I've done at different times and places, trying to put it in there and let them choose a path. And I'm hoping that'll eventually for more of a sort of video game format. As you go through the course, you come to these junctures and you choose paths. Even in the discussion of a novel, we're working on Sula. And I'm thinking, okay, you're working on Sula, you're going to write a paper. And in general, I say, focus on race or gender or class or family. Well, why not make them pathways they follow as they're reading Sula? So we maybe read the first 40 pages together. And then after that, I say, okay, now we're going to break into paths that will be connected to your paper choices. Choose a pathway. And then the course breaks into 4 different paths, and they get to pick. Well, I want to do masculinity. I want to do femininity. I want to do family. Right? I'm thinking about places where I could do things like that, that maybe could keep me along the skills path that I need to pursue, but at least, if not give them total openness, give them choice.
You'd also create communities within your class by doing that, right?
Right. But it's also tricky, how do I do it in Canvas? I like to do these integrated lectures with kind of quiz questions. I would now have 4 of those going at once. How do those show up in the grade book?
Well, I wonder if it's worth taking some of the pressure off you to do the heavy lifting. So if the communities are created and then you worked in a presentation element, then they could do a screencast where they're presenting their ideas as like a video workshop to get feedback from others. And then you could just chime in giving feedback like office hours instead of having to lead the discussion each time.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea.
Awesome. Donna, I want to invite you into the conversation, but I don't want to put pressure on you to start here. Was there a part of your course that you would be willing to share, or a question or a topic that you're thinking of that you'd like to jump in on? I'm going to unmute. Oh,
right.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Yeah, I'd be happy to share my class and to get feedback from you all. So first off, I'm feeling like I really need to kind of knock back some of the work that I have assigned in the class. Let me see if I can. Where are we here? Class, yeah. So basically, the way my class, I don't really do much with the homepage, and that's one thing I put it down as a note here. I should do something more with the homepage, because what I do is every Monday morning I'll send out an announcement, and the announcements kind of orient them to what our goal is for the week. So let me just pull up, and I do a lot of announcements. Are you guys seeing my screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right. A little pop-up just happened here. So, sometimes announcements just come in the middle of the week. Sometimes, it's a formal introduction, and those are always saying introducing whatever that week is. So I'll kind of preview what it is we're working on, and kind of introduce or emphasize different things I want them to think about. That was week 15. I haven't, that was from last semester. I have to probably revise. I'll revise it before we get there this semester. I was just grabbing one. Yeah. But then an average week then is I want them to come into the week and get the overview. So Jason, much like yours, and Tony, I want them to kind of watch, here's the Google Doc version if they just want to read that, or there's a video that I created. And then I have the readings with different questions that they're free to explore those if they want. If they don't like, they don't have to go and look at those. Those are just things to think about. And then they have their different writing assignments. And I think you guys might see that's kind of heavy. I kind of think like I have them doing thinking a little bit for this week on feminist criticism, and I have them responding to Spunk, and I have some questions. And then they can choose anything from a previous story that they've written to think about reading that through a feminist lens. With their discussion about points, I thought was really interesting, because I used to have things worth very few points. I think these were each worth 10 points. So they get 5 points for task A, 5 points for task B. And one of the criticisms I got at the end of last semester is, man, we have to do a lot of work for hardly any points. And so I was like, well, it's all weighted. It doesn't, but they didn't connect that. And so then I just doubled all the points and whatever. It doesn't matter to me.
Totally. Yeah.
So that's like one assignment they'd have to do is the feminism, and then they'd have a similar then job with, I'm kind of asking questions to get them to kind of use the lens just to kind of model for them. This is the literary criticism unit. And so anyway, so that's kind of what the week looks like, and what the kind of workload on each individual writing task. And I break it up into the writing is due by Wednesday, and then the discussion is due by Sunday. And the discussion is compulsory, so they have to get in here, and I ask them to respond to just one classmate's post in each one of these. And again, I'm thinking this is 12 hours of work, and that's probably why I'm getting the feedback that I am. But
are you responding to all of the writing that they're doing?
Every one of them. And so it's intense. And this semester I decided that when they're doing each of their writing assignments, I respond now to the writing. Last semester, I responded to both the discussion and the writing. Mm-hmm. This semester, I try really hard to get all my responses on their individual assignments, and that's just for them to see. I'll challenge them, or I'll commend something they've done, or do something individually, or encourage them to look at another student who's written something, like go check out this student's thing. He had this idea about whatever. So that's kind of a one-on-one discussion with each individual student. And then I used to respond to everybody or the whole class discussion and get into the discussion and you know, kind of have an overview. I'd send out an overview email afterwards about the cool points of the discussion and what we got into. But it was just an enormous amount of work. So this semester I've decided that I just check that they've done this stuff for the discussion, and I don't comment on their discussions. But what I'm noticing is a lot of what they end up talking about in the discussion are points that I've talked to them individually about in these weekly writing assignments. So, and then there's this kind of additional resources stuff that I'll include. So that's kind of what the overview of the week looks like. But what I'm finding is the workload for the online class, I mean, they're doing 12 hours a week, and I feel like I'm just going crazy. So this is actually a relief, this whole discussion of I'm doing too much and I'm making them do too much, and I can maybe knock back, you know, they can maybe choose, you know, which one of these in your discussion about choice, maybe they can choose one of these things to look at, and then they're on that path of discussion with each other. And then I guess another question I had for you guys, I was jotting down notes as you guys were kind of talking, and one question I had, and I'm always thinking about, my daughter's a freshman at UC Santa Cruz this semester. And so I always kind of track what she's doing and kind of what I'm doing. And when she was a senior in high school, I would ask her questions too, because sometimes I feel like, especially over, I don't want to say this in a bad way, but sometimes it feels like, wow, the work I'm having my students do feels like she's doing much more work in her AP classes in high school than I felt like the level of work that she was doing there with what I'm asking my students to do. I felt like, wow, there's this huge kind of disconnect, and this is supposed to be college level work. And so anyway, she's been reminding me a lot, like when I'll get frustrated where people aren't doing their homework or they're not, you know, kind of responding, getting things done in time. And she's like, you have to remember that they're taking online classes for a reason. and it's like, and so like this discussion of how do we get them engaged and how do we get them really kind of wanting to choose to explore and play. And I keep hearing her words in the back of my mind saying, they just want to get it done. And then they just want to get through it and get it done. And so I don't know, I'm always kind of balancing that, because I don't want it to be like, oh, we're in this class just to get through it. Like, hopefully there is some place for fun and play. So there's that point. And then since I have the floor, I'm going to just say one more thing, and then I'll shut up for a while. The technology, the use of technology, that's another thing that I've really struggled with, like having them do, like create a video, or having them do some of these more like high skills technical aspects. I've kind of gone back and forth on that, because part of me feels like I want them focusing on the content of the class. I don't want them spending their homework hours in learning a new technology. I want them spending their homework hours on the critical thinking and the skills that I'm trying to teach them. And so it's kind of balancing that because I think that stuff might be more fun, might be more playful. But then if I feel like my responsibility is to encourage the critical thinking and the writing, I don't, and I only get so many hours a week with them to get them to do that. I feel like that's a big struggle for me.
I think it's important when we look at this 8, 10, 12 hours to remember that when we have our on the ground classes, it's consumption and production. And so part of what they're doing for that 12 hours is not producing something, it should be consuming something. And so if they're doing 12 hours of production a week, that's too much. Mm-hmm. So what is the balance between consumption of information and production of units to turn in? And that's maybe something we should think about when we're crafting these weeks for the students. I also live in the more work than probably other classes side of the spectrum, and I've heard that from students as well. But I think that this transition from on the ground teaching to online teaching has all these different opportunities for confusion and conflation and everything else. And I think this is a really important one. What are they consuming each week, and what are they producing?
Go ahead, Chad. Yeah.
Don, I just wanted to share something I do in class that I found really successful, and it didn't take a lot of class time. And it was something I did at the very beginning of the semester. And it's an assignment I've been using that's evolved over the years. But it's essentially a rhetorical analysis unit. And I use it to to focus on audience and purposeful writing, let's just say. And so I would do a variation where instead of maybe assigning a speech and then doing a rhetorical analysis of that speech, they would write a one-page letter, one-page max, double space, and it has to be to a specific audience. So usually it's somebody they know, like a parent or something. But they write a one-page letter, and you know, we go over ways of thinking about rhetoric. And then the second part is a rhetorical analysis of that letter, right? And in the rhetorical analysis is 3 to 5 pages. So in total, we have about a 5-page assignment, right? I really like the assignment overall, but I don't honestly like assigning a rhetorical analysis anymore as far as dedicating actual class writing time to a rhetorical analysis, just because of thinking about authentic writing experiences. And you know, they do it in an English 100 class, an English 202 class, but beyond that, you know, when are they going to be using that? And so, but I wanted to keep the ideas, the values, the skills involved. And so what I ended up doing was they still write the one-page letter, because that's something that I feel is transferable and very, very valuable. But then instead of doing a 3 to 5 page rhetorical analysis, they still do it, but they do a video analysis through Screencast-O-Matic. And so it's covertly making them do all the work of a rhetorical analysis, but in the space of a 4 to 5 minute video analysis. And I introduced the same paragraph models. I don't require them. I just introduced them as models and samples. And so they end up mimicking a lot of it and put together a rhetorical analysis of their letter. And then it introduces technology. And I do it in a relatively short amount of time, so I can kind of have it both ways with the technology, but also the work that I want to see them doing and the skills that I want to see them achieving, and purposeful writing, audience, and all those things. And so I just wanted to share just really, really quickly, if you want,
Yeah.
Curry, are you able to switch it?
Let's see.
So quickly, Chad,
Yeah.
do you have a lot of like questions from students, like when they have to use Screencast-O-Matic? Are they confused? Do you feel like you're spending a lot of time kind of giving tutorials on that, or is there?
No, because before the semester starts, you know, when I send the students, before the semester starts, I send them my welcome email, and in that welcome email, I include a list of technologies that they need to start playing around. I say play around with, you know, that they need to play around, including Google Docs, Google Slides, which they'll use for the Screencast-O-Matic. And so they have lots of practice. And then once the semester starts, I tell them, I said, I hope you've been playing around with it. I hope you've been watching this tutorial video. I hope you've been doing this. And so it creates a sense of urgency, like I need to start playing around with this. I need to get familiar with it. But I do it that way instead of, and it's kind of like a video game. I say you should just play around with this video game, you know? And that seems to have worked. And I was really, really happy with the results this semester. You know, the level of analysis is one thing, but just to see them doing it was really exciting, because I got to have both, and they ended up learning a technology, you know, that they'll be able to use in other classes that's very relevant. And so if I share,
We'll let you. Apparently we can do this at the same time, so
Okay.
this is new for me.
Can you see that?
Oh, I have to choose.
I stop share.
There you go. Now I see it. I see how.
Okay. So Donna, or can you see my screen?
Yeah, hold on. Let me mute myself. Or someone mute me.
I got you, Donna. I got it.
So anyways, there's this one-page letter and then the analysis. And then this is just a sample letter. I should have highlighted a lot of the cool moves, but I require one credible source. So they get practice early in the semester locating and integrating source material. But it's all a very, very short assignment. But there's a lot of moves happening in the assignment that are really exciting and fun to play with. And so I love it because I can get excited about an entire work, you know, in a single class. I can distribute copies to everybody. We can analyze it together as a class because it's just one page of writing, right? And then when it comes to the actual analysis, this was one about nothing bundt cake and how they should offer, the CEO or the manager should offer a certain cake year round, right? And so it was really fun to see them playing around.
The goal of his essay is to persuade Mr. Also,
Let me just show you.
bundt cakes.
So flattery was a common way to open up.
Express my fondness for his product. Let me start by saying that I'm a huge fan of your buntlets. Sure, my use of detail recognition was accomplished by displaying my knowledge on this limited time to people rather than one. particularly.
That was one. And then this one was really strong. I'm not going to play all of it. This one visually looked beautiful.
They've invested. I think this is a good idea. And pathos audience to feel producing work.
That was another one. And then this was one of the stronger ones.
Amanda Albert, English 100.
You can just listen for a sec.
As harmful. A little more about our audience, given the aliasness of this letter, but the four I'll address are audience awareness, collective concern, urge to action, and guilt tripping. I know that Ms. O is the type of person who wouldn't read anything that beats around the bush. Therefore, my actions here are crucial to grab her attention and engage her with the topic. To the same effect, I use a formal tone to her, us instead of I and me, to give the impression that most of rhetoric that I mention and not acting. I put this near the end, so
anyways, it gives you a sense of what it was like, but Donna, I really liked it because I spent only 3 to 4 weeks on it. And all of it, I think, was in an effort to move away from 4 full essays and to move to like 3 full essays with a shorter essay early on to instill certain skills and values that I thought were important while still being able to do a lot of the stuff I wanted to do for the semester. So in case that helps.
So we are at 2:30. I'm totally digging this. This was wow, the time went by fast. I couldn't believe it for me. But if you have to go, I want to respect everyone's time. So thank you if you have to bail. I do want to just quickly follow up. I really think, Jason, you pointed out consumption and production. And I think what's really interesting that has me thinking about play as the thing that might resolve that. In other words, the way I consume a game is to produce something inside that game space, and that it's in games that those two things become really one thing at this, right? And so, but still, games can be fatiguing. Certain games can really wear me out, and then there's moments in games where I get refreshed from like the heavy lifting of the gameplay, and then I'm ready to go back into that other side of it. So that also has me thinking about timing. And I know this is what we do in our on-site courses. We kind of have this fun opening thing that's inductive and leads into this more heavy concept thing. And right when our students are at that kind of like, I get it, we have them write something, right? And so we're really kind of using time to manage the consumption production engagement. But facilitating time in an asynchronous environment is tricky, right? And so we have to use space. That's really what's available to us. Designing this in front of that, or this to smash into that, etc. So I mostly wanted to say that to try to pull some threads together. And again, I want to respect everyone's time. Do we want to follow up on that? And if, yeah. Or do we want to say goodbye? Because I think we are at time, and this was really, really awesome. Any last thoughts before we say goodbye?
No, this was awesome. I'm digging the conversation.
Awesome.
Yeah. I really appreciate Jason's point as well. I think I don't really realize how much time it takes for the students to digest all of the information that we're giving them. You know, I think when I was thinking about the amount of hours, I often translate it into production, right? And I just assume that they watch the video one time, when in fact, I know they don't, you know? And so this is very helpful for me to kind of rethink how I sell the time with regard to what they have to digest. So that's very interesting.
Cool.
And I like your game. I get the game point. I'm not sure how I feel about gameplay. There's a part of me that really likes it, and I think that there's places for it, but it's also really hard because it goes back to Donna's point as well. And it's, you know, when I think about my fully online 202, each semester I give this informal kind of questionnaire about, you know, what's their attitude towards the class, et cetera, once we're already in it. And, you know, it's like half and half. Half love the discussions. They like the idea of community. They like some of the play that I embed in the discussion boards. And the other half are like, I need to get through this. Like, I appreciate that you make some of those discussions not mandatory. And it's like, okay,
yep.
Cool. I gotta reach all these folks. And so it's really hard for me, at least, to kind of to take something and then like for example, to make play mandatory. You know what I mean? Like, this is such an interesting space. I would hope that eventually we're able to create these spaces that speak to the individual needs of every student, regardless of what the Carnegie Union is such an old school way of defining learning. You know what I'm saying? And so I would hope that the online space becomes a space where the students who are invested in deep learning can gain something, the students who work full time and have 2 kids can gain something, and even those folks who are working professionals and want an almost competency-based version of a course to work can gain something. Like, that's the beauty of the online space.
Right. Yep. Awesome. Like, no, I want to respond, but I don't, because we're at time.
Does that matter?
No, not for me, but
okay.
I don't want to.
That's for me. I got to head to class.
Cool.
Yeah, awesome.
Thanks everybody.
Later, Jason.
Thank you so
All
much,
right,
Jason.
appreciate it.
All right. So I think there's a book by Jane McGonigal doing, I forget the name of the title off the top of my head, but she's looking at World of Warcraft, and she's looking at, it's the most popular multiplayer game, right? Massive multiplayer game that's existed. And what's great about it is you're always, you can play with others, and there's some tasks that you can't accomplish unless you join a team. But when they looked at the data and they looked at what players were doing with their time mostly, it was mostly on individual tasks. It was mostly on, like, for me, this would be fun for the next hour. And it was only when that intersected with another person and those goals were shared that you got that multiplayer social aspect of the game. And that was never compelled. You could play that game and never access certain things and never need to play with people. And you could still get whatever it was out of it that you wanted to get out of it. And I always think about that. So it's not necessarily the gamification of a curriculum that I think is interesting at all, actually, but it's those kind of tropes, right? It's the tropes of play. It's that kind of ludology, right, of that space. It's that, I think, is really kind of pedagogical in a lot of ways that I want to grab and implement.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it. I find it fascinating. It's, part of my thinking now when I think of the comp environment is I try to borrow from the metaphor of physics, or actually from the metaphor of Silicon Valley, and that is this kind of first principles metaphor. So what are the first principles of a comp classroom? And for me, like for me, content is not a first principle, and even a theme is not a first principle, right? A first principle is clear writing, right? Clarity. There's a first principle of a comp classroom. Right. And so how do we inform the curriculum based on first principles? Yeah. So it's like everything that I hear now, I have to put into this multi-layered approach. Like, is that getting at a first principle of a comp classroom, or is that somewhere else along the hierarchy, so to speak? Yeah. And so for me, even things like the classroom community to me is not kind of one of the is not a first principle of the comp classroom, and so, but that's personal, right? I mean, we could argue this in various ways, and so it's really hard. It's like I'm still just trying to figure out the first principles and then build from there.
But Tony, do you think that by, like you mentioned, community, do you think by not dedicating more time, but emphasizing community, it allows you to tackle the principles more easily for certain students?
I think for some students, I think it helps those students. So I think there's a place for it. Does that make sense? Yeah, I think that the students can opt in to the classroom community. At the same time, I think that the students can opt out of the classroom's community. Right. So, like, for example, in my on-site environment, when I ask them to get into groups, they can be in groups of 2, 3, 1, or 4, right? Right. It's this sort of thing, because again, it's those are all choices that they can make. Right, but you're giving them the option, Totally, absolutely. Yeah, I'm not denying any of this stuff. Yeah. I'm just saying that it's not it's not foundational, right? If it's not foundational, then they can opt in and out. I think that's kind of how I'm looking at it. Does that make sense? It's not foundational, but just by giving them the choice seems like it's kind of foundational. What? No, like community? Yeah. How so? Because community for you is defined it's not defined by like 3 people per group or 4 people per group. And so by establishing early on that they can pick their groups, it feels foundational in that sense. Well, but they can also be in a group of 1. In other words, I'm not promoting that they even have to work with another person. Right, right. You know, so for example, when it comes to like I don't do a peer review where everybody has to partner up, because they could consider, a student could consider himself or herself a peer. A peer unto himself,
right?
And they can work individually. And I like, because again, if the issue is clarity, that to me is different than the necessity of community to have a discussion about clarity.
And so then in that case, they're achieving clarity on their own.
Yeah.
Right.
Solipsism.
Kind of like,
potentially. Yeah.
I wanted to share one more thing. Do you guys mind hanging out for another minute or two?
Yeah, I have time.
I'm so curious. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. And I thought, so I wanted to share this, Donna, in response to what you were kind of asking about. And so this is, and my online course is structured similarly to yours, Donna, with kind of, there's a kind of a lecture on the top, stuff to read next, stuff to like an activity next, and then whatever essay we're working on. And that structure is consistent throughout the semester. Every single week, there's always a lecture, what we're reading, what we're doing, and what we're writing every single week. But what I wanted to share was, this notion of structured space and then undefined space. I really play with this top area throughout the semester. So the week one, the only thing it is just the announcement. There's no lecture. The link here is basically a text version of that announcement. And so it's very flat. There's only one thing to encounter, and that's instruction for how to navigate just Canvas in my course. The next week, it gets a little more content heavy. It's still structured. It's like, the topic this week, the workload to expect, how difficult it is, some notes to consider, and then I give them the lecture. So I kind of like, baby step into that. Week 3, almost exactly the same thing, heavily structured, but now there's 2 lectures. Week 4, I'm starting to back away a little bit, but it's still pretty structured. Like, here's the major deadlines this week, keep in mind, right? So they're starting to expect a pattern, right? But there are also, I'm hoping, becoming equipped with what to do with this space. At the beginning, there's only one thing to do. Now at week 4, there's a couple things to do. So I'm starting to give them a little more choice, but within structure. By week 9, it gets weird, right? It's just like, okay, on the one hand, we were talking about rhetoric. On the other hand, we're going to start studying storytelling. There's some stuff to click on, right? And it's really, if I started the semester with this, I think I'd get a lot of emails like, what am I supposed to do? But they're prepared for this by week 9. Week 10 is similar, right? It's a bit more visual, a little bit more playful. By week 15, it's bananas. It's like, I don't even tell them what to do with these links. It's just, here's some links and we're moving forward, right? And they can completely ignore this if they want. But quite a few of them, because they do these reflections, they talk about like, I actually spent a long time on that Google search for Dada art and just was weird. And you know what I mean? And so, thinking about, Marxist criticism, feminist criticism, and building up to that point, is there a space that, okay, I'm kind of been trained to do something with it. And when I get there, I get to really act upon it instead of it acting upon my decisions, might be, and yeah. So
I love that. That's really great. And I love the kind of more kind of exploratory and kind of just playing and figuring out what aspects of the class you're interested in. And I talk to my daughter about this all the time, like when she's in her history class right now, and the way the professors organized it and how, they read 8 books and they can choose to read one book or not. And, and then she's learning about this thing, and then maybe she doesn't really care about that, so she doesn't go to that discussion, but she goes to this other discussion night. There's all these different kind of avenues of inquiry under this kind of shell of, kind of more modern European history. So I think this reminds me a lot of that. That's really cool.
Yeah, and I thought of this when you were sharing earlier. If students are bringing this, I got to get in, I got to get out kind of attitude.
Yeah.
But and then when they find in our course something that forces them to slow down, the question is, well, what's doing that? Is that something? Is that a barrier? And is it frustrating? It's like, God, I just want to get this done, and so it's not compelling. Or is what slows them down something that they can't resist? Something like, what is that? And I have to slow down. And
that's super cool.
Yeah.
Curry, do you ever, as you as your pages get more bananas as the weeks progress, do you ever draw from your students like stuff that they have posted earlier in the semester and then find ways to showcase that later as it relates to something that you're doing, like with Dada or street art or something?
Right. Not over the course of the semester, and not in this 100 class. It definitely happens week to week. So content they post in week 2 is actually in this lecture for week 3.
Gotcha.
But in my my English 40 class, this grammar class,
Right.
I'm starting to do a little bit more with that. Early in the semester we did this, and remember when we did that, it's sort of like a gallery walk of go check out what your classmates did. But that made me think of something else that came up earlier, is assignments that bridge online courses and on-site courses. I think is really interesting, and I wondered, is there an opportunity for assignments that bridge semesters, like let's see,
the legacy assignments that he talks about?
Exactly.
Right.
So like your crowdsourcing research, Tony, could there be an assignment like find something cool, and I'm not going to show you that there's this legacy assignment yet, but just find something cool. But when you're ready to share it, you're sharing it in a space where 2 or 3 or 4 semesters worth of students have shared stuff.
That's cool.
And now it's this really cool cache of yeah, that could be pretty interesting.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Hold on one second.
Yeah.
Hey, wait, can I see her? Yeah. I'm on.
Well, Corey, I was just asking because you're as the instructor, you're doing the heavy lifting to showcase a lot of cool, introduce your students to a lot of cool new stuff. And I wonder if we always have to do that, kind of drive it where throughout you have several weeks of interesting content that you've been exposed to from your students, and how can you circle back at times to bring that to the fore?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I like this thinking a lot, where it's kind of like less is more. You want more from the students than from, in other words, the students become the producers, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think I really tried that. I tried that a lot in my 202. I've tried to turn the student writing. So for example, I stole your idea, Chad, in my 202, where the students they write an op-ed, right? And then so I still keep the kind of rhetorical analysis component, but instead I frame it, I give them the WPA exam from SDSU for transfer students, and I give them the GRE prompt. And so those to me are actually real world rhetorical analyses that exist. They're high stakes, but they exist.
Right.
So then then they choose any of the op-eds that one of their classmates has done, and they have to use that as what would be the reading for the WPA or for the GRE, and they have to then answer one of those prompts.
Right.
And so the GRE leans heavily on the logical strength, and the WPA leans heavily on the rhetorical effectiveness. And so what happens is that they become the producers of the readings for that unit, right? And so then the actual exam is on what they've produced. And so I like that a lot. And I love the idea of trying to get them to produce all of the materials for the course. I do it for one unit at this point. But if I could get that to, if they were the generators of all the content, I mean, that would be an amazing, I think it'd be really hard to sell, but I think it would be a super cool thing to do for the whole semester.
Yeah, there's a book about that, right?
Yeah.
I can't remember the guy's name who wrote it, but a textless class, I think, and the students generate or provide all the content. Yeah.
Tony, do they know that in advance that their op-ed is going to be used for the rhetorical analysis or the?
Yeah, they do. It's really interesting. The way that I've now done it is that I actually choose anywhere between 3 and 5 that I've looked at, and I make sure that there's really strong ones as well. Because the interesting thing for me is that it doesn't matter, because they always understand, they understand analyzing for some reason as looking at deficit. Let me find the problems. Right. And so what's cool is that I give them strong ones, and they still have to build a case about why it's strong. And so it almost reinforces this idea that you can analyze good writing and build cases for why it's good. So it's almost as if they're chosen, it's a cool thing now. It doesn't mean their paper has a lot of problems.
Right.
That's awesome. That is really cool.
Cool. All right. Well, we've hung out for 20 minutes more than, so thank you very much.
This is unbelievable, Curry.
Cool.
I really like these conversations. They like, I feel like a weight has been lifted off me because I feel like all I've been doing is this class, like all of my days and hours. And I feel like, okay, I'm going to pull it back and kind of figure out how to give choice and play, hopefully, and lots of things I got to think about now.
I actually think that this is a bigger conversation than just online as well, because I think this also applies to our on-site. I think it also applies to just kind of this larger conversation about how we understand the Carnegie unit. And I think that we're not, it's again one of these things in our department that functions tacitly. That is, we don't really have the open conversation about it, and then we fall back on the assumption that all of these people are building these courses that have insane amounts of work, and some people are, and some people aren't. But because we don't have the conversation, we don't know, and we also don't know kind of how people are defining what learning is, like deep learning versus, you know, quizzes, so there's just so many big questions here.
Well, and the other thing is for all of us associate faculty, like we're not part of any of these other conversations, and so we're kind of operating in the dark and trying to get as many little pieces as we can from various conversations that we hear to try to figure out if we're in line or not. And the different schools we teach at have different, like Miracosta is so different than Palomar. Like it's great. And it's really hard for us to know, like, I know I want to be in alignment, but I have no idea if I am. So that's why you know what would be really cool is if we had not like a slow thing, but like an open conversation with the whole department. Like, I don't like that kind of dividing line, associate versus full-time, where we could actually like a transparency conversation where we could talk about slows, how people address slows in their courses, because like, for example, I noticed that Jason, it's like he made his course so directly related. And I'm sure part of that is because all he's heard from the department is that you've got to match it's all about slows. Right. And my course isn't like that at all. We don't even talk about slows till the 4th unit. And then they realize we've been covering it. You know what I mean? And so the other thing is when we're teaching English 100 at multiple different places with different requirements, we're trying to make that class fit.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, lots of different molds, and that's a challenge sometimes, you know. So I think that's part of what we end up we get this kind of Frankenstein model because we're trying to get everything to fit together.
Totally.
So
yeah.
Curry, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thank you.
This is
And
awesome.
thank you for your ideas. This is super cool. I like this stuff.
Cool. Yeah. And Chad, I love that rhetorical analysis thing. I took a bunch of notes. I'm excited. I think I'm gonna try that. That's awesome.
I'll send you some links, Donna, if you want.
Awesome. I would love it. I would love it.
You know what's funny is that my course has taken, like, I've got Chad's op-ed stuff, and then Curry, I have a magazine thing as my first assignment. Like, I just steal from everyone.
Me too.
Awesome. Awesome.
So
Tony, what's Katie's name?
This is Hannah.
Hi, Hannah. Oh my goodness. Look at you. Oh my gosh. How I just wish mine were that big again. Oh.
This is my TA. She does all the grading.
Oh. Yeah, right. So cute. All right. Bye, you guys.
All right.
Cool.
Take care.
Take care. Thanks, guys.
Yeah,
Take care.
see you guys.
Later.
See you, dude.
Later, man.